Ahoy, everyone. Wyatt Claypool here, and we are back on the whiteboard today to talk about the Calgary mayoral election and how the mayor candidates are currently polling between each other. Now, I will say up front that municipal polling is a little bit more finicky than provincial or federal because oftentimes you're working with personalities and you're not really working with parties. While, yes, there are two parties, or technically three parties, and one just on the council level, competing in this election, it's sort of a half baked concept at the moment within Calgary. The government had just basically made it so that you can start a party this last year, and they've only really rolled it out in Edmonton and Calgary, and that is it. And so in this election, you have Communities First, which is the more conservative party. There's a Better Calgary Party, which is also a conservative party, but they don't have a mayoral candidate. And then there is the Calgary Party, which is like the left wing Union Progressive Front Group Party. But I want to focus mainly today just on the mayor's race, the council stuff that's getting way too small time. I will be putting out an endorsement list for Calgary of mayor, councilor, as well as school board trustees. Obviously, the councilors are really hard for me to fill in all at once. But obviously, and full disclosure, I am endorsing Sonia Sharp for mayor. I do not work for her. I do not get paid by her. And in fact, I'll probably end up donating to her campaign. By the way, guys, if you live in Calgary, I would encourage you to get a Sonia Sharp sign because we have to not just keep out people like Mayor Jody Gondek, currently in third place, but we need to keep out Jeremy Farkas. This guy back in 2021 was pretty good, a more sort of socially liberal libertarian who cared about lowering taxes and cutting wasteful spending. Well, this is what his campaign team looks like in the year 2025. The man has gone full progressive. When your two managers, and those are the managers standing right next to him, when your two managers are still wearing masks 24/7, one of them has this giant HEPA filter thing. I was at the debate and I saw him. This isn't an old photo. He's still doing it. This is telling about the crowd that Farkas is hanging out with now. It's not just, oh, well, that's just their personal decisions. When you do stuff like that, you are signaling a very left wing sort of politics. I've looked through the social media for the woman on Jeremy's right. Yeah, it's very left wing. You couldn't put it anywhere else. I think that Jeremy Farkas's brain broke after he didn't win the mayor's race in 21, and now he is trying to become like Nenshi and Gondek because he's like, well, they win, and I want to win, so I need to do that. I need to basically like mold myself into a winning mayoral candidate. And at the moment, he's technically winning. He has 31% in this Juno News poll that Ian Bexby and his team had commissioned. So Farkas is currently at 31%, Sonia Sharp 16.5, Jody Gondek 13.5, Davison 8.5, and Brian Thiessen 5.5. Thiessen is the candidate for the Calgary Party. Davison is an independent. Gondek's an independent. Sharp is running with Communities First, and Farkas is an independent. But I actually don't even really like calling people independents or a party candidate because, well, Farkas is basically owned by federal liberals. That he is surrounded by federal liberals and Alberta NDP supporters on his campaign. In fact, in this photo, I believe the guy calls himself a conservative, but the guy at the front left of the photo is a pro blanket rezoning advocate. I have debated with him. His name is Alex McCall. And yeah, this is the people that are supporting like Jeremy Farkas. He is not the same guy that he was back in 2021. He is a very, very different character now. It's like how even after losing in 21, Aaron O'Toole, who was already very liberal, has become a full-on borderline liberal supporter these days. So yeah, what we're seeing here is really that Farkas and Gondek is dead in the water. If you are 13% in a poll these days as the current mayor, you are dead. And we are going to be talking about the Leger poll in just a little bit here, which will take a little bit more nuancing because the poll wasn't really delivered properly. But overall, when you're not doing very well and everyone knows who you are, you can't just say, well, there's undecided people. Undecided people know who you are, and they're not coming over for a reason. even Farkas at 31% in this poll that had 20% undecided, I don't think Farkas is actually going to be moving up anymore unless Gondek people realize that they need to vote for Farkas if they want to keep the left winger in the mayor's office. Sharp has actually been on the rise, and somebody who has been falling over time is Jeff Davison. There are very few places where I actually buy into the idea that vote splitting is real. Even in municipal politics, oftentimes when the progressive wins and there was like five conservatives who lost, it's because you had one dedicated progressive and you had five guys who were barely trying. It wasn't that they were splitting each other's votes. Each other's voters didn't even know the other one was running because none of them actually hit all the doors. But what we have is Davison, who ran for mayor last time and got 12.9% of the vote in 2021, is running again and is currently serving us up an 8.5% result in this poll. And other polls have not been better. He's even lower in the Leger. And even if I correct for urban and suburban voters, it's not looking good. This guy, his campaign team has been like harassing me for no reason online, chirping me in person. They're those childish people on the planet. And Davison, frankly, is running an incompetent campaign. And I'm using this visual of him feeding a cupcake to one of his organizers, Brett Pierce, as being kind of representative of the campaign. The man wants to be mayor like Jeremy Farkas, but he isn't even sleazy enough to ally himself with people who can get him there. And so now his campaign's just completely disorganized, just trying to find other, like they're getting a Better Calgary party to lit drop for him, which is funny because the Better Calgary party asked him if he would be their mayor candidate, and he rejected them. He rejected them, and they are still handing out his literature, which I don't know who that makes look more pathetic, a Better Calgary party or Jeff Davison. Jeff Davison, who is scared of all risk, so he doesn't want to associate with anyone, but he'll still let them hand out his literature. But yeah, Thiessen, I think he's actually going to be doing better than 5.5% because the Calgary party is running candidates in all 14 wards in Calgary, whereas Communities First, I believe, is running 9 or 10. And then they're sort of staying out of the way of certain independent candidates that they like in some of the other wards. And so I think Thiessen is going to do better just because the marketing is going to be there because they are going to be advertising him in every single ward of the city with their local candidates. So I do think he is going to be doing better over time. But I want to show you, I'm going to cut over to, actually, we can probably just look at the graphics on the Juno News website. There's no point in me racing everything just to show you this. But Kean did a really good job when he was commissioning this poll because he shows us the general numbers for each of the candidates, and then they show how would federal conservative voters vote. And that's where it tightens up between Farkas and Sharp. Now, this is all a consequence of the fact that a lot of people who voted for Farkas in 2021 are conservatives. But Farkas isn't a conservative anymore, but a lot of people are still sticking around. But that's where the polls tighten up to 39.4 Farkas, Sharp 22.5, Davison 11.6, which makes sense because Davison is more conservative, obviously, than Gondek and Thiessen, so of course you jump into third place. But this is where it's interesting, and Kean Bexty made a good point. The numbers of who supports Farkas kind of expose who he is. You go down here, this is mayoral choice, vote choice among liberal supporters. Now, among the liberals, obviously Gondek, that is her bread and butter, and she gets 34.8% of the vote. But look, Farkas gets 26.3% of federal liberals. I think it's because a lot of people know it's like the camp who voted for him last time are willing to vote for him this time. They haven't been paying attention, but there's enough liberals who have been paying attention and see that he's moved liberal, and now they are willing to vote for him because they've probably been seeing all the interviews he's been doing, palling around with Nenshi, basically criticizing the UCP, borderline endorsing the NDP in the last provincial election. And a lot of those people moved over. And as much as people will try and claim, like, oh my goodness, Sonia Sharp's a liberal, because I think she had like a couple liberal votes on council. Believe pretty much all of them. She said, oh, I regret that and I'd repeal that. She's only at 8.5%, which should tell you that liberals themselves do not see her as a liberal, but they do see Farkas as a liberal. But Now I want to jump back over. Actually, the funny thing is, Davison is doing disproportionately better with liberals than Sharp is. Sharp is just doing better in the election, so naturally she picks up a few more liberal people because maybe they like certain things and certain policies in her campaign. But Davison is actually pretty close behind her for being so far behind in the overall polling, and it's because Davison himself was a big liberal supporter back in the day. He was somebody who like voted very consistently with Naheed Nenshi and Gondek when he was on council. He even voted for, or not voted for, I don't think he lives in the same ward, but he endorsed and helped cut a campaign video for George Chahal in 2021, the porch pirate, uh, who basically was ripping away all of the literature of his opponent, Jag Zahoda, while he was going around. He endorsed that guy, and maybe it's because they served on council together, so he endorsed him. My goodness, if you're so dull that you just endorse a guy because you know him, please leave politics. It's an adult business, and we do not need children endorsing their friends for office. But in a second here, I'm going to pause, and then I want to go to the Leger poll and kind of show you the urban-suburban breakdown. I don't think it's the best poll. This one has 20% undecided. The Leger poll has like 45% undecided, so take certain aspects of it with a grain of salt, but I will be back with it in just a second here. I'm going to do this segment a little bit more quick and dirty. So I'm just taking the top three individuals who are in the race because, frankly, Davison is an also ran candidate and just splitting Sonia Sharp's vote by pretending to be super conservative. And then you have Thiessen, who I think he's going to be doing better than the 5.5% that we see in the other poll, but I don't think he's going to be punching like 20s or 30s and be in contention to actually become mayor. You watch his debates, and he kind of has that Nenshi style, or he's going to talk like he's on Xanax, and we need to really come together and invest in our city. It's bad whenever I see him in a debate. But I want to show you the Leger numbers, which remember had 45% undecided because, yeah, it's not like a bad poll or anything like that. It's just I would say that mayoral polling is tough because so few people are paying attention. The Juno poll, I'd want to see their methodology just to see how they were able to get more consistent people being decided. It just depends on the sample that you get. The problem with this Leger poll and why the top line numbers are not reliable, it had Farkas at like 14, Gondek at 13, and like Sharp at 7. The problem is the mix of this poll is like more than 2-to-1 urban to suburban. And if you live in Calgary, you know that this city is like 3-to-1 suburban to urban. I think I looked it up. On a more strict definition, it's like 3.8 suburban to urban. It's just not a very urban city. Tons of suburban communities everywhere. Some people live downtown, but it's like maybe 200,000 people out of the 1.2 million. It's very, very minor. But let's go through this now. And I'm going to be writing the urban numbers on the left, and then we are going to go to suburban on the right. I would say the suburban is effectively the real race. Not only is the actual amount of people living in suburban areas higher, but suburban turnout also tends to be higher. So with the Leger numbers, Jeremy Farkas in urban areas, which also shows you how liberal his support base is 16%. Sonia Sharp is actually only at 4% in this category for urban. And then Gondek, Mayor Jody Gondek, is at 13%. We then jump over to suburban, and this is where it's more of a real race. Farkas is at 12% in suburban areas. Sonia Sharp is at 13%, actually beating Farkas in suburban areas, which is kind of where you want to be winning. And then Jody Gondek is actually at 14% in suburban areas. So she has the more consistent vote between the two areas, but I don't think you're going to see her actually perform as well in suburban areas than urban. What this could have been is just that they had a high turnout of respondents from Northeast Calgary, which is the suburban area that Gondek does well in. Her old ward as well as the Northeast. Farkas, though, with 16% urban areas and 12 in suburban, really shows the shift in his appeal. Because the thing is that you can just say, oh, maybe it's just a bad sample. Well, maybe Sharp should be higher than 4. in urban, and she maybe even should be a little bit higher in suburban because, frankly, based on what the activity on the ground, Sharp and Sharp has a pretty well organized campaign. I would kind of doubt that she was going to be suffering that much in urban areas. But the thing with this, though, is the numbers are generally going to be correct. Farkas has become an urban liberal candidate, and his suburban appeal is slipping. The only way he wins, though, is if the suburban appeal holds up enough. Like on election day, with all voters decided, he's going to get 20% in suburban areas, but then he runs up the score and tries to get around 40% in the urban areas in order to offset the losses in the suburbans. So I would say the path, and I would say that still the best person to be voting for, if you're a conservative in this Calgary mayoral election, is Sonia Sharp. She's on the rise. Farkas has either stalled out or is falling, and Gondek is like the Chicago Lori Lightfoot of this election. Some of the polls, like this Leger one, show her in second. I think that when we get to election day, there's a good chance she'll be in third place. Plus, Brian Thiessen with the Calgary Party, they are also basically being backed by Calgary's Future, which is another union front group. And I think that you may see a defection of public sector union workers over to Brian Thiessen. Not enough for him to even be competitive. Maybe he gets 14% of the vote, 12% of the vote, but that's all going to be coming from Gondek or the potential progressive voters that Farkas is now trying to court. So with enough push and with enough name recognition gain and with the more televised debates that are going to happen later on, I do actually think that there is a good chance for Sharp to win, especially because she has communities first with her, which means that like Brian Thiessen, but on in a more effective way, she's going to be able to get out the vote better for herself. Whereas Farkas and Gondek, basically as a single campaign, have to have a get out the vote sort of strategy for every single ward themselves. Whereas with Sharp, you have Dan McLean in Ward 13. You have Terry Wong. You have, Cornelia Weeb in 8. You have something, I forget her name, Taylor in Ward 1. There's all these people who can go around reminding people to go vote for the mayor as well. But anyways, so that should be it for this video, guys. Hopefully you like the polling content, even if it's super local stuff like this. This is just a race I really care about, and I don't want to have another crappy mayor in Calgary. So if you live in Calgary, make sure to get a Sonia Sharp sign linked in the description below and pinned at the top of the comments. It is no holds barred at this point, and I'm probably going to be donating a large sum to Sonia Sharp because I just want them to be running more ads, doing more stuff in order to sort of box out Jeremy Farkas. And remind people of the type of people on Farkas's campaign. If they're still planning to vote for them, talk to your parents. If your parents liked them last time, but they haven't been engaged this time, let them know. And yeah, let them know that Jeff Davison is also not very conservative. And if you're thinking of voting for him, just vote for Sonia instead. My goodness. Anyways, so with that being said, I will see you guys all later.